Introduction. Artificial intelligence risks turning human beings into blunt instruments. This is because many specialized AI systems can perform jobs better than any human ever could, and rarely make mistakes in the fields they are trained in. This removes the incentive for humans to learn. Why learn a new language when AI can translate it for you through smart glasses? Why learn to code when AI can do it so much better and is far more time efficient? These are not hypothetical questions. They are questions that millions of people are already asking themselves, and the answers they are arriving at have consequences that we are only beginning to understand. The disappearing incentive to learn. One of the most immediate and underappreciated risks of AI is not that it will become malevolent or gain consciousness. It is far simpler and far more mundane than that. It is that AI will make human effort feel pointless. When a machine can translate any language in real time through a pair of smart glasses, the years of study required to become fluent in a foreign language begin to seem like an inefficient use of a human life. When AI can write cleaner, more functional code in seconds than a trained developer could produce in hours, the motivation to spend years mastering programming diminishes. When specialized AI systems can diagnose illness, review legal documents, and forecast financial markets with greater accuracy than credentialed human professionals, the entire value proposition of professional expertise is called into question. The incentive to learn has always been driven by necessity. Human beings acquire difficult skills because those skills unlock opportunity, provide security, and confer social value. AI is systematically eroding all three of those motivators simultaneously. And when the incentive to learn disappears, so does the learning itself. And with it, capabilities that, once lost across a generation, are extraordinarily difficult to recover. The specialist machine. What makes the current moment distinct from every previous wave of technological disruption is the nature of what is being replaced. Past technologies replaced physical labor. The tractor displaced the farmhand. The printing press displaced the scribe. The factory assembly line displaced the craftsman. But in every one of those cases, the human beings who were displaced retained their capacity to learn, adapt, and move into new forms of work. The skill was lost, but the ability to develop new skills was not. AI is different. Many specialized AI systems can perform jobs better than any human can ever perform them, and rarely make mistakes in the fields they are trained in. This is not a modest improvement over human capability. In many domains, it represents a categorical difference in performance. AI systems do not tire, do not experience stress, do not have bad days, and do not make the errors of judgment that are an unavoidable feature of human cognition. Within the narrow but increasingly wide fields they are trained on, they are, for all practical purposes, superior to any individual human being who has ever lived. The physician who has spent 30 years developing clinical intuition is outperformed on diagnostic imaging by a model trained for a fraction of that time. The lawyer who has spent a career mastering contract law is outpaced in document review by a system that processes thousands of pages an hour without error. This creates a deeply uncomfortable question that most public discourse has been slow to confront. If the ceiling of human expertise in a given field is structurally below what AI can achieve, what is the point of developing that expertise at all? An unknown workforce. We have no idea what the workforce will look like once a huge portion of the human population has been de-skilled by AI, and whether society can ever recover from such an event. This is perhaps the most unsettling dimension of the problem. Not that we know the answer, and it is a bad one, but that we genuinely do not know the answer at all. Economists, governments, and the technology companies driving this transformation are all, to varying degrees, navigating in the dark. Previous industrial revolutions followed a recognizable pattern of disruption and recovery. When mechanization displaced agricultural workers, those workers moved into factories. When factories automated, workers moved into service industries and knowledge work. There was always a new frontier of human labor to absorb the displaced. The optimistic assumption embedded in most mainstream discourse about AI is that this pattern will repeat itself, that new industries will emerge, that new categories of human work will appear, and that the disruption, though painful, will ultimately resolve itself as it always has. But this assumption deserves serious scrutiny. What is different now is that AI is not displacing workers from one category of cognitive labor and leaving other categories intact. It is advancing across virtually every domain of skilled human thought simultaneously. The question of what new industries will emerge to absorb workers displaced from law, medicine, finance, software development, design, journalism, and education is not one that anyone has answered convincingly. And the social consequences of failing to answer it are not minor. Mass deskilling on a civilizational scale produces poverty, social instability, the collapse of identity and purpose that human beings derive from meaningful work, and a political volatility that history suggests is extremely dangerous. Whether society can ever recover from such a theoretical event is a question we should be asking loudly and urgently. Not after the fact, but now, while there is still time to shape the outcome. The erosion of independent thought. Another problem is whether AI is removing the ability for humans to think critically and independently in the absence of AI. This is a quieter risk than unemployment, and in some ways a more insidious one, because it operates gradually and invisibly below the threshold of public alarm. Critical thinking is not a passive faculty. It is an active capacity that must be exercised to be maintained. When human beings are consistently relieved of the need to reason through problems, when AI navigates for them, drafts their communications, resolves their ambiguities, and structures their decisions, the cognitive muscles responsible for independent thought are used less and less. And what is used less atrophies. There is already empirical evidence for this at a small scale. Research has shown that heavy reliance on GPS navigation measurably reduces spatial awareness and the ability to orient independently. Studies on internet search behavior suggest that the ease of outsourcing memory to search engines has reduced the depth and durability of human recall. These are modest, early examples, but they are indicators of a broader dynamic that, as AI becomes more capable and more embedded in daily life, could become far more pronounced. AI risks becoming more of a dependency than a tool. The distinction matters enormously. A tool extends human capability. It is picked up when needed and put down when not, leaving the underlying human capacity intact. A dependency is different in kind. A dependency is something without which the person cannot function, something that does not extend capability but replaces it. If a generation grows up making decisions, solving problems, and navigating complexity exclusively with AI assistance, the capacity to do those things without that assistance may not simply be reduced. It may be absent. And a population that cannot think critically in the absence of AI is a population that is, in a very meaningful sense, no longer fully autonomous. A crossroads with no clear exits. Very few alternatives seem to be presented. Human beings appear to be moving towards a crossroads where they will either have to live in poverty at the behest of AI or engage in work that AI cannot perform, such as construction, which is backbreaking and has a high poverty rate, until AI replaces those jobs as well through robotics and increased mechanization. This framing deserves to be taken seriously because it reflects the actual structure of the choices currently on offer. The most common answer given to the question of what displaced workers will do is physical, embodied labor, the jobs that require hands in difficult spaces, bodies on dangerous sites, presence in the physical world, construction, plumbing, electrical work, elder care, manual assembly. These are jobs that AI, in its current form, cannot fully replicate. But this answer is inadequate on multiple levels. First, it asks knowledge workers, professionals, and skilled tradespeople to accept a dramatic and involuntary reduction in the social and economic value of their labor, not because they failed, but because the system changed around them. The implicit suggestion that a displaced software engineer or radiologist should simply retrain as a laborer is not only economically unrealistic for most people, it fundamentally misunderstands the scale of the disruption and the human cost of what is being proposed. Second, and more fundamentally, it is only a temporary answer. Robotics and increased mechanization are advancing rapidly and in parallel with AI. The construction site that employs 50 workers today may employ 5 in 20 years. The warehouse that currently requires hundreds of workers is already being automated. The care work that seems irreducibly human is the subject of active development in robotics research. Every physical domain that AI and robotics cannot yet penetrate is simply a domain that has not yet been automated, not one